Just a few moments before we begin to set the context for the Compassion Grand Rounds. And for those of you that I haven't yet met, my name is Micheline Saint-Hilaire, and I work with the Catholic Health Corporation of Manitoba in the area of organizational change and development. And the corporation was started 12 years ago now by the Grey Nuns, and they decided at that time that they wished to ensure that their mission of care, compassion, and hope continue in a contemporary way now and into the future. And so today, the corporation sponsors 15 communities of service, including the St. Boniface Hospital, Sarah Riel, St. Joseph's Residence, Centre de Santé, St. Rose General Hospital, just to name a few. And so under the auspices of the corporation, we launched the Compassion Project as one of the many ways to connect to an essence, to a human value that engages and inspires. And through this work, we are asked to find ways to renew our commitment to compassion as a fundamental human value, one that is ever so present in the care we show to one another, to the people we serve, but also one that can be fragile and elusive. So the Compassion Grand Rounds really provide a forum to welcome speakers who have stories, insights, teachings to share with us on how we can nurture and strengthen compassion within ourselves, in health and human service organizations, and beyond. So I'll invite Dawn McDonald, who I've worked closely with to bring many of the Compassion Project initiatives, and I'll invite her to introduce today's speaker. Dawn.
Thank you, Micheline. It's been great to be on this journey with you. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Jerome Stone. Jerome is a registered nurse who has, I might have just turned your presentation off, so you'll have to turn it back on with my elbow, who comes to us from Boulder, Colorado. Jerome is the author of the book Minding the Bedside, Nursing from the Heart of the Awakened Mind. He's also a blogger on the site Minding the Bedside and what meditation really is. We're really happy to have you join us today, Jerome. Jerome arrived in our community on Friday and has been journeying with us over the last number of days in our meditation day of mindfulness on Saturday, I should say. And just getting to know you, we know that our conversation is going to continue. So Jerome is a longtime practitioner of meditation with an emphasis on the study of cross-cultural contemplative practices and on the study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism. We're so happy to have him continue the conversation about compassion with us today. Thank you.
First of all, I have to go into my technical, there we go. Right, very good. So welcome, thank you very much for having me as your guest. I'm very honored to be here. I will say that this is my first presentation since publishing my book. I've self-published it, and I've been working on promoting and marketing it for the past number of months. Everything okay? Okay. Gotta check, make sure sound is okay. And so it's a real pleasure, and it's a very auspicious beginning. I've been enjoying Winnipeg, enjoying the company of these wonderful people. I went out for a walk yesterday, about 2 hours, and walked around your wonderful city. I really do appreciate it. I was hoping it would be a little colder, but that's okay. Now, I didn't know that there was a private joke here in Canada. It was told to me as soon as Dawn saw my presentation here, so I was going to start with this slide here, not knowing contextually what a slide of a burning fireplace means, because I was going to call this a fireside chat. So I had this up, and Dawn said, you may want to know something about what that means, and I went, okay. So since I don't know what it meant, this is meant to be a fireside chat. It's really just a conversation. I'd like to share with you some insights that I've gained. And some of my experiences in working in healthcare. I'd like to thank these two wonderful people, Micheline and Dawn, as well as Shirley and all the people who have made this happen. I'd also like to thank many, if not all of my patients and people I've worked with who have helped me to see my more compassionate and my less compassionate self, and as well as really thank my life, because my life has given me circumstances that have allowed me to see where I fall very short in practicing from a mindful place and where I actually show up. Additionally, I've had teachers. I'd like to thank Stephen Levine, Thich Nhat Hanh, Saki Santarelli at the Center for Mindfulness at the University of Massachusetts, and finally, to thank primary teacher, the author of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, Sogyal Rinpoche, who I've studied quite extensively with. He's taught me most about my mind and how to work with it ever so slightly. And without his teaching, without gaining the knowledge of all these teachers, what I have to present today would be theoretical at best. Instead, I've managed to have a little glimpse of what it's like to work with my mind. Now, by the way, this picture here is from the Rocky Mountains. It's along a bicycle training route that I did this past summer. I rode a thing called the Colorado Triple Bypass, which was 120 miles in one day over 3 mountain passes and 10,000 feet, over 3,000 meters of elevation gain. And through that, I learned about practicing, about my awakened and more my sleepy mind, and all about suffering of the body, and most particularly my posterior. So without further ado, when we say practicing from the heart of the awakened mind, I guess first thing we need to do is find out, what does it mean? What is the awakened mind? Where is its heart? And what does practicing mean? So the awakened mind is the mind that we encounter and stabilize through the practices of meditation and contemplation. And that's really what we'll be talking about a lot today. The heart of this awakened mind is boundless compassion. And I'll differentiate what boundless and bounded compassion is during the talk today. And practicing means doing anything in our lives: nursing, medicine, accounting, caretaking, or raising children, based upon engaging in and with meditative mind and meditative awareness. It's very important that I make this distinction and talk about this, because when I saw the title, actually the title was assigned to me for this talk, I thought, okay, so we're talking about practicing, and what is practice? It's actually a state of being. It's a way of being. And I can't claim to be in that state of boundless compassion at all times. Far from it. In fact, I get annoyed when I see what appears to me to be ignorance and foolishness in politics or government, in healthcare or science. And I'm annoyed with drivers who cut in front of me, or people in the shopping aisles who pull in front of me when I'm ready to check out. Nor can I claim that I'm always resting in this wonderful, spacious mind, free from the fetters and distractions of daily life. Far from it. Wish that I were. But what I do find is that through my formal practice, I'm vigilantly aware of when I do show up and when I don't show up, and when I am practicing from that space and when I'm not. And each opportunity I'm given when I find myself far from that mind allows me and is an invitation to return to it. I'm also aware when I find myself in circumstances of personal suffering, or when things feel like they're too much. For instance, going over the last 12,000-foot pass after a long day of riding, after the death of a loved one, or simply when life simply feels like too much. And what I find is that I have a seemingly unlimited reserve in those times that has as its basis meditative awareness and compassion. And really what practicing is showing up with that part of our mind intact as we work with others, whether in a clinical setting or simply at home with our children, with our partners or spouses. The premise of this talk is that compassion and meditation are inextricably linked, connected. In fact, compassion is the heart of meditation, and meditation is the awareness of that compassionate heart. And this doesn't mean, though, that to be compassionate we have to meditate. I'll go into that a bit. Compassion is an innate human quality. But what we do find as we practice contemplative art is that we are more in touch with, and we're able to connect with that space of compassion. Practicing from the heart of the awakened mind means that we base whatever we do, whether that is practicing nursing, medicine, law, accounting, or child rearing, on an established connection and engagement with our meditative mind, at whose center bubbles up a wellspring of compassion. It means that we base our presence and our actions on a well-trained mind, a mind that has been tamed from its normal habits of distractions and self-absorption. And that the focus of our mind is on the well-being of another. And this focus doesn't have to be on a patient or client. It can be the checkout clerk in the grocery store, the auto mechanic fixing our car, or the telemarketer who disturbs us in the middle of a dinner with our family. It really can come to bear anywhere. So why do we care about compassion? We all are inherently, genuinely compassionate. And this is evidenced by when we see natural disasters or tragedies, how our approach to our patients are, or to victims of crime. We have this inherent compassion. As I said, it's something innate, something we all have anyway. Usually, our compassion comes as a basis of witnessing suffering of others. But where does this compassion go when our mind is out of sorts, ill at ease, distracted? I know that for myself, when my mind is distracted and thoughts about the importance of me, it's all about me, come about, run rampant, I lose compassion for those I interact with, and inherently I lose compassion for myself. It shifts from an awareness of or connection with compassion to a frantic attempt to find some peace within my mind and to get rid of this claustrophobic dysphoria I feel when I have myself too wrapped up in myself, and when I've lost my connection to the inherently present and compassionate presence. Practicing from the heart of the awakened mind means to find the mind that is capable of boundless and unbiased compassion, which is the meditative mind or meditative awareness. So I've started in this discussion, haven't even really defined what compassion is. So when we think of compassion, we have a lot of different definitions. Here's one definition that I kind of been working on, and it'll change, but we'll use for now. And that's to be able to find ourselves within the person or persons for whom we're feeling compassion. Finding unity instead of division with others. Finding the same potential within ourselves for the suffering and unhappiness that we're witness to. And with that realization of sameness, doing everything in our power to alleviate the suffering experienced by others. Compassion can be naturally arising, or we may have to generate or evoke it. The compassion for others that we're used to usually depends on circumstances and the person for whom we're feeling or not feeling compassion. And for me, as I said, that not feeling compassion is usually leveled towards politicians or bad drivers. For you, it may be someone else. I refer to circumstances because we usually don't feel compassion towards others who aren't outwardly suffering. The rich, the powerful, the movie stars, famous people. However, just because people aren't outwardly suffering doesn't mean that they don't suffer within their mind. We're all equally capable of suffering due to our lack of presence, our lack of connection to one another. And this is due to our mind's disappearance, lack of connection to that compassion itself. So let's start with a few quotes by people who have put into words their views about love and compassion. But love not only as we relate to the world, but as we have it for ourselves. Jesus told us to love others as we love ourselves. Now that's very good, except for if we have nothing but disdain for ourselves, or we base our love for ourselves on a me, the little mantra we say all the time, me. That's not the kind of love we're talking about. And the Quran states, not one of you is a believer until he loves for his brother or sister what he loves for himself. And that's great unless we love becoming inebriated or love extreme sports or horror shows, in which case we wouldn't really love that for others, although we may actually think that that's loving ourselves. And the historical Buddha was quoted as having said that you can search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself. And that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Again, this love is a boundless love. And it's not a self-cherishing love. It's an acknowledgement of the similitude, of the sameness that we share with others. And we can find that within the contemplative, within the meditative mind. It's also an agreed upon point, which embodies compassion, that actually compassion for oneself is equally as important, probably primary, to having compassion for another. We're used to self-love being kind of about me, and what compassion is wishing the same happiness for others as we wish for ourselves, and wishing that others are free from suffering that we also wish ourselves to be free from. So in defining compassion as it relates to the bigger picture, I'd like to turn to my friend Albert Einstein. And he wrote, "A human being is a part of a whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts, his feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. The delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living beings, creatures, and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody's able to achieve this completely, but striving for such achievement is in itself a part of liberation and a foundation for inner security." What's poignant about this is he discusses the difference between a circle of compassion and a kind of prison for us. And that's where bounded compassion is, the difference between the boundless and the bounded compassion. And so we're looking at compassion today and practicing from this heart of the awakened mind as boundless. Next, from the author of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, Sogyal Rinpoche, he writes, "What is compassion? It is not simply a sense of sympathy or caring for the person suffering, not simply a warmth of heart toward the person before you, or a sharp clarity of recognition of their needs and pain. It is also a sustained and practical determination to do whatever is possible and necessary to help alleviate their suffering." So compassion is not passive. It's not a passive endeavor. It's not compassive. It's not simply seeing others who are suffering and feeling sorry or pity for them. Too bad for them. It's sustained and practical determination. And with this determination, we bring our mind, an awakened mind, to the task. Finally, a brilliant definition of compassion comes from the book Zen and the Brain by Dr. James Austin. It's a seminal work weighing about 700 pages and written by a former professor emeritus of neurology at the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center. And it guides us through the neural pathways as well as the history and practice of Zen meditation with grace and artful discourse. Austin writes, "True compassion means we correctly perceive a situation, sense how it would affect us, project our feelings sympathetically toward the other person, and then reach out selflessly to respond in the most sensitive, appropriate way. In this manner does fully ripened compassion, subtly informed by the most enlightened wisdom, deliver the milk of human kindness deftly, non-intrusively." It's one of my favorite quotes because it really describes what the awakened mind is. To better perceive a situation, correctly perceive it, requires we check in with our perceptions, and that's where meditation, contemplation, becomes a benefit. This correct or clear perception is usually thwarted by our inability to remain present in the moment with ourselves and with others. I know of no better remedy for this kind of absent-mindedness of the present than meditation and contemplative practices. We learn to meditate and to generate compassion, practicing from the heart of the awakened mind in order to anchor our mind in those things that are positive and wholesome within the mind, and to learn how to correctly perceive the world around us. We learn to practice meditation and to enter into contemplation as a means to engage in the sustained and practical determination to do whatever is possible to alleviate the suffering of our fellow beings. And while endeavoring to learn meditation, we may find that at times, or all the time, we are less compassionate for ourselves. From the book Christian Meditation, Experiencing the Presence of God, author James Finley writes, and I'm going to show you a quote, and please don't try to memorize it, but there's extra points if you do. No, it's way too long. There. Okay, you have 15 seconds. Good. You got it? Good. I'll read this quickly because I'm probably babbling here. Our feelings of impatience and frustration with ourselves in meditation are certainly understandable, especially when they persist in spite of our best efforts to overcome them. But as we sit in meditation, we can begin to recognize the subtle violence inherent in our impatience with ourselves. As our awareness and understanding of our limitations in meditation continue to deepen, we begin to gain greater insight into what is happening. We realize we are catching ourselves in the act of perpetuating violence towards our wandering mind, our wayward will, or our sleepiness. In short, towards those very aspects of ourself that need to be loved the most. We realize that to stop meditating simply because we feel we are not good at it amounts to abandoning the very aspects of ourself that need patience and loving encouragement. We see that the whole venture in meditation is going to be a rough ride unless we can learn not to invade and abandon ourselves in response to all the ways in which meditation exposes our limitations and shortcomings. It is precisely at this point we begin to appreciate the liberating power of compassion. So in the context of practicing meditation, much as the previous quotes from Jesus, Buddha, and the Quran, Finley's quote reminds us that compassion is about having it for ourselves, not only as a basis for learning to be compassionate with others, but as a basis for learning our own contemplative and meditative practices. At its core, meditation is about being more of who we are, more true to ourselves and less distracted by our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And that who we are involves being present and undistracted, informed by a mind that is free from prejudice and judgment. The discursiveness of our mind, lost in thoughts, feelings, and emotions, prevents us from being compassionate with ourselves and with others. And so what do these thoughts, feelings, and emotions do? They cause us to get caught up in expectations, perceptions, and concepts. And when we bring them to bear on experiences or people, they lead us to judge them, losing our compassion and our presence. So how do we find compassion at the heart of meditation, and how do we find within compassion the awareness of meditation? First, we need to define what meditation is. There are so many different forms of meditation, and with them come a variety of definitions. For our purpose, let's use the following definition. It's a working definition that I use for the practice of meditation. It's one based on teachings that I've learned through many different studies, and particularly from Sogyo Rinpoche. Meditation is a process of gradually coming to know our mind, or your mind, coming to rest in a state of non-distraction where you release all sense of hope and fear, cease to alter your mind with following after thoughts and arisings in the mind, and where you simply learn to simply be mindful, aware, and spacious. When we begin to practice meditation and find ourselves, borrowing from Finley's words, perpetuating violence towards ourselves, we are given a choice. We can either continue doing what we've always done, to chastise ourselves and adding to the distraction of the mind, or we can find compassion for ourselves, realizing that when we sit down to practice contemplative or meditative practice, we're making an effort to know ourselves more, thus benefiting others, those we work with, our family, our unfortunate spouses, partners. The heart of our presence and our practice comes from a mind that doesn't cave in on itself in the face of challenges, but instead recognizes its truer nature. And we get to that mind by establishing a formal practice to create stability within our mind, to train our mind so that our informal practice, which is our life, has as its basis a well-trained mind, and then practicing from the heart of the awakened mind becomes our life. How do we practice? Well, I was going to segue into some of the research that's being done on mind-body medicine and on meditation and compassion, but I'd like to give you something tangible today to take home. And looking at how much I've been talking, I'm not going to be able to present too much anyway. But meditation does work. Research has shown it. It's shown that it positively affects the central nervous system. It positively affects the HPA axis, the hypothalamic adrenal pituitary axis, more commonly researched in psychoneuroimmunology. We know that it helps with pain, depression, ADHD, end-of-life issues, and many, many, many more conditions. Functional imaging is continuing to provide us with evidence that the meditative brain is significantly different than the non-meditative brain. Research scientists such as Sarah Lazar at Harvard University, Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, and Paul Ekman at the University of California have shown that we can actually rewire our brains through contemplative practices to get them to behave in ways that are counter to our evolutionary impetus at self-survival. So it's actually like we do positive brain damage through meditation and contemplation. And Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the innovator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, has been doing research for 3 decades on its benefits. So it works. We know it. But just as we aren't going to learn ballet by watching a ballerina do an arabesque, we aren't going to learn meditation by reading the latest research. We've got to do it. We've got to practice it. And who can practice? I have to tell you, there are some limitations in who can practice meditation. In order to practice, you need to have 2 very important things. You have to have a mind, and you've got to be breathing. Now, fortunately for all of us, we've got those, so congratulations. What I wish to bring to you is a practical way to practice from the heart of the awakened mind, offering you some simple steps to working with the mind. And please note, meditation is not about incense, it's not about mantras, it's not about icons, it's not about cultural accoutrements, it's nothing added to it. It's simply about training our mind to become less distracted and more inherently who we are. And it's verifiably effective. It's for anyone who wants to practice it. And through practice of meditation and encountering the challenges within our own mind, we come to have compassion for all others, realizing that much of our suffering, similar to others' suffering, and when we think of someone who's been given a diagnosis, sitting alone in a room by herself with her thoughts and her mind, or someone who's just had a procedure, or someone who's just lost a loved one, and then the compassion grows because we experience in our mind the same turmoil that they potentially experience. And that's how we practice from the heart of the awakened mind. So, I'm going to start speed talking here. There are 3 pillars of meditation. They make up the whole and can assist us in learning to meditate and in keeping our meditation practice stable and vibrant. These pillars are mindfulness, awareness, and spaciousness. We'll discuss each one of them in detail, but remember that they are all part of the whole. You can't really tease them out. It's the way we practice our meditation. First of all, mindfulness is a process of bringing our attention to an object, perhaps to our breath, as a means of anchoring our attention in the present. It's how we learn to bring our attention mindfully into moment-to-moment awareness. It is also the beginning of how we rescue ourselves from our habitual patterns of acting or reacting to circumstances in the same old way that we've always done. Mindfulness, however, is often the victim to distraction. Remember that we've defined meditation as a state of non-distraction. Yet due to our incessant habit of being distracted, we may find it quite challenging to mindfully focus on anything, our breath, our body, even trying to focus on our thoughts. It's here that the second pillar of awareness comes to play. So mindfulness is equivalent to focus. It's how we bring our attention to bear on something. Awareness may be said to be the most important aspect of meditation in terms of keeping our practice, and that could be our practicing from the heart of the awakened mind, simply practicing parenting, practicing partnering, practicing driving. It's what helps us keep our practice consistent and stable. Awareness is the cognizant presence that we have in our mind all of the time, even when we are distracted, that we use to bring our mind back to our mindfulness when we become distracted. Awareness could be said to be the sentinel or guard of our mindfulness and of our mind. It's what notices when we become distracted and gently, gently brings us back to practice. And when I say awareness is a cognizant presence, what I mean is that regardless of whether we're distracted, there is an aspect of awareness, pure cognizance, that is always there and with us. And that very awareness is what we use to realize that we're distracted. Now if this sounds a little confusing, imagine you're driving and you get distracted and you realize you're distracted. You bring yourself back. Or you're in an argument, you're angry, and you realize your anger is just taking you off, and something realizes this anger. Or you're practicing meditation and you realize that you've been doing your shopping list. What is it that brings us back? It's that cognitive awareness. It's that cognizant awareness. Some people call that meta-awareness. So you could say that actually awareness is the most important part of meditation because it's what maintains the stability and prevents us from meditating on shopping, laundry, argument that we just had with someone. See, I was going to do a little exercise in between all of these. In the name of time, we'll just say that awareness is attention. It's what helps direct your mind towards your mindfulness. And then spaciousness is an attitude as much as it's a technique or component of meditation. It's how our mind needs to be when we're meditating. It's what prevents us from straining our mind when we sit down to meditate. Spaciousness is the humor that we have when we sit down and meditate for 20 minutes and we're sitting like a mountain, and then we realize that 19 minutes of that we were elsewhere. We were checked out. We were following some thought. We were worrying that our meditation wasn't good enough. And the spaciousness is the humor that allows whatever arises in our mind to simply arise. We can use the metaphor of the sky. The sky simply is, and when clouds float by, the sky isn't particularly perturbed. It's not bothered. And when a rainbow appears within the sky doesn't get flattered. The sky simply is. It's vast and spacious. And that's the spaciousness that we talk about. It's not spaced out, right? But it's open and it's accepting. A wonderful and traditional metaphor that's often used to describe these characteristics of meditative mind when it's undistracted, clear, and spacious is that of a candle used to illuminate a picture in the darkness. In order for a candle to light up a picture in the dark, it must be still, because a wavering flame will blur and distort the picture. Additionally, it must also be bright, because just having a still flame, but faint flame, may not illuminate the picture completely. Finally, this candle must be free from obstructions that limit its ability to illuminate the picture. Imagine the picture to be the true nature of your mind, and the candle to be the combination of the elements that we refine as we practice meditation and contemplation. Mindfulness is the stillness of the flame. Awareness is the brightness of the flame. And spaciousness is the ability of the flame to be free from confinement in illuminating the true nature of mind. Use this image if you find it helpful, because it can be a very powerful visual cue to working with your mind. While practicing, imagine that the deeper nature of your mind is an amazing picture, perhaps one you've never studied before. And apply the illumination of your mind to investigate the mind, mindfully, undistracted, meditatively aware of your mind, and spaciously abiding and observing all that you encounter without any bias. And now to the point that you've all been dreading, we're going to have some practice. So what I'd like people to do is simply get comfortable. You don't have to do anything special, remember? No incense, no cushions, simply be. For some of you, you may wish to keep your eyes open. If you've already had lunch, keep your eyes open. If you need a nap, keep your eyes open. If you're agitated, close your eyes. Okay. All we really need to do is simply sit and begin by watching our breathing. just becoming aware of your breath. And we're not trying to control our breathing. We're not doing anything with our breathing. Simply aware. And should your thoughts drift to what you had for lunch or what you're going to have for lunch, use your awareness to bring your attention back to the breath without judging, without commenting. Whatever arises, allow it to arise loosely and spaciously. Simply relax your mindfulness and awareness into the space of the mind. This doesn't mean spacing out. Rather, it means keeping an open and present awareness. Aware of your thoughts. Aware of your mind. Aware of your environment. Perhaps the beating of your heart, or the sound of the heating system in this room. And spaciously attend to all of these phenomena without the slightest wavering of your attention. When you become aware that you've become distracted, spaciously, with humor and appreciation for your efforts, bring your mind back to the breath or to the moment. Simply abide, calmly abide. And now reflect on someone you know who is suffering, physically or emotionally. And reflect on how wonderful it would be if their mind was free from distraction, free from suffering. Imagine how it would be for them if they could simply be with whatever is challenging them without losing their sense of peace, without losing their presence. Simply allowing whatever is happening to happen. Practicing from the heart, the awakened mind, health care from the heart, the awakened mind, is this simple. It's being mindful, aware, and spacious with all that you encounter throughout your day, throughout your life, in sickness and in health. And now relax. Simply allow whatever is occurring to be. And that's it. So, again, there's no good or bad. If we begin to beat ourselves over our bad meditation, then we're simply perpetuating the mind that we're attempting to heal. Like James Finley's quote. It's just a matter of getting used to engaging this mind, getting used to practicing from this place, and becoming familiar with your mind. And that's the part of the process. That's the non-judgmental awareness and the spaciousness, the humor. And having been a long-time practitioner, I've got to share that humor has really been life-saving at times when I realize how hard I'm trying and how little I'm doing or perfecting my mind. So, there we go. Well, it's been a delight to share with you. Thank you so much for coming to this fireside chat. I hope you've gained something of value from this short talk. If you have a desire to know more, what we've discussed, or if you'd like the slide deck, I have the PowerPoint slide deck I can send to you. Please feel free to contact me. I also have business cards out on the desk there, and I would really encourage people to visit my blog site, which is up there, and it's also on the cards. Reason being is because that for me is a full-time job almost. I am a self-published author and self-promoting. Here's my shameless self-promotion. I'm a self-promoting author. And it's through people who come to the blog and share that I'm able to get this material out to people. I have free ebooks on the site, 2 free ebooks, hundreds of posts. I link to other sites, and it's really, really, really to benefit all of you, to benefit everyone who may gain something of value. There's downloadable audio tracks, there's video, as a service to really helping all of us to learn this. So there's my 30 seconds of self-promotion, and now I believe, should I say this or do you want to say this? Micheline? Is that if there are any questions, yes? Okay, if you have any questions, need clarification or anything on anything I've said or haven't said, please do feel free.
We might start with the people linked in through telehealth. We'll give them a little space to link in if you have any questions. We invite you to indicate it.
Well, no questions. I hope that's not a sign of befuddlement. What?
So now we'll open it up to the audience here. If you have any questions, there's a mic here, and we invite you to.
Okay. Yes.
As many of my colleagues and I are often sleep deprived,
Yes.
I wonder what the trick is to not meditating yourself into sleep.
Wonderful question. Do you work night shift? Or okay. I worked night shift. I worked 12 years ICU night shift. It's interesting, but what I have found and what I teach people is that sleep is simply, I hope I can make this clear, sleep is simply another arising of the mind. And what I mean by that is when we're sitting to practice meditation and sleep starts coming up, when we fight it, what happens? We go to sleep. When we allow it to rise as we would allow a thought or a feeling or emotion, it's quite astounding and profound, but sometimes the sleep dissipates as easily as a thought. It hangs out for a while, like clouds in the sky. It sits there, and we're sitting and we're practicing, it's starting to go, and then it disappears if we don't go, I gotta stop this, I gotta stop it, because it's actually like the effort of trying not to fall asleep puts us to sleep. And if you fall asleep, wonderful, you get some rest. There's nothing really wrong, again, there's nothing wrong with meditating and sleeping. It's if your meditation becomes sleep all the time, then you probably need to get more sleep and need to meditate at a different time. Choose a time, after your second cup of coffee, or, watch a really exciting television program and meditate. But no, sleep is actually in an ebook I wrote on how to deal with the 4 distractions. To meditation, that is one of the 4 distractions I cover, is sleepiness, because a lot of people really struggle with that and think there's something wrong. Naturally, there's 2 things. First of all, we may need sleep. Second of all, our mind is not used to engaging in this kind of practice, and so we start investigating our mind, and we start allowing it, and all of a sudden our mind goes, whoa, and it just kind of caves in on itself, and that can arise as sleep. And what I found is that oftentimes as we begin to learn and practice meditation, that may come up more. And that as we become more familiar with it and we gain experience, that can actually dissipate. The most important thing is don't have an aversion to it. Don't fight it. Meditation is not about trying to free our mind from thoughts. A lot of people think that to meditate, you sit and you kick the thoughts out of your mind. And for many people, thoughts become the enemy in meditation. This is not the case. Thoughts are simply the natural arising of the mind. It's like waves. The ocean doesn't try to suck its waves back down. Just they arise and they pass away. And our mind is truly like this. As we develop more skill and more familiarity in meditation, the thoughts arise and they can dissipate quite as easily as a wave, very quickly, and sometimes even without almost a cognizance, without really knowing what the thought was about. It just arises and disappears, and sleep can be very much the same. Good question, thank you. Yes, Daniel?
Just curious, I don't know if you can demonstrate or feel or share with us how you feel this has impacted the quality of care that you've given,
Sure.
and if it's noticeable within an organization that you would work with.
Sure. Yeah. In the quality of care, this is a joke, okay? Go buy my book. No, because I have a story about it where I really relate this. We all care, for those of us who do direct patient care or some kind of care, we all care from our heart, we all care from our mind. The problem is we also have the burden of staffing, of overtime, of schedule, oh, here's my list of 15 patients I have to look after. And so what happens is our mind runs after. Our mind goes, I hate this assignment. I hate Mr. Jones. What a pain, the surgeon, the nurse, whoever, just made a comment to me. And what we do is we follow after that, and we lose our presence. And so really, we're not going to necessarily change the circumstances, but we're going to change our mind in response to the circumstances. And the same thing within the healthcare environment. Also, that's a chapter in the book too, which is mind is the forerunner of the environment. How our mind is when we are within our work environment, in any work environment, a law office or the bedside or wherever, how our mind is will qualitatively affect the workplace. And if we can be mindful with our peers, with the peer who we think doesn't do enough work, or the peer who we think is doing much, or our boss, or if we can bring a mind focused in this compassionate space, then we can slightly affect the quality of that interaction. And I would dare to say that if enough of us can do this, what we can do is we can actually shift the mind of the workplace. So that's my belief. This is what I've seen in organizations. I actually have worked within an organization where everyone practiced meditation. And it's not that things didn't happen. It's not that people didn't bump into each other, but it's just what people did once they bumped into each other, once they ran into difficulties. That's how it affected. And this is really kind of the mind then helping to create the workplace, positively affected. Yes? Yeah. Rather crucial. Rather crucial. It's not rather crucial, it's essential. Okay. And the reason being is because if you look at it, when we encounter, right, it's okay. So fire starts in our house and then we run out and buy the fire extinguisher. Not going to save the house, right? We start skidding on ice driving and we start practicing learning how to skid on ice. It doesn't work. So we encounter a difficult circumstance and then we go, oh, what am I supposed to do? As a foundation in creating stability in our mind, then we have that tool, and then when we need to use it, we've honed and we've sharpened that meditative muscle. A blog I did 2 weeks ago on my site, I was flying back from San Diego, and I had the second roughest airplane flight I've ever had in my life, where we were dropping 100 feet at a time in the plane, coming over the Rockies. I was very, very glad that I had a basis of meditation and a foundation to work with my mind, because I looked around the plane and I could obviously tell that there were not seasoned meditators there. There were people, you know, this one woman grabbed my hand, and, death grip, and people were holding, and people were calling the flight attendants, and I could really see the level of fear that was happening in people. And so I advocate for taking formal practice and taking time to do it, because we really can't learn to master any skill. I can't go out on a tennis court and start playing Venus, right? It's not going to work. I have to go over and over, right? And like for me, bicycling, I had to bike, 6 months to practice for this long ride I did. I wouldn't have been able to just go out and ride over these 3 peaks. Impossible. It's the same thing with our mind. We believe that we have control over our mind. It's not until we realize how out of control it is, we go, And so what we do is, by creating the formal practice, we exercise that. We become familiar. We don't become as fearful with the thoughts and the things that arise. We go, oh, there's that little friend. There's my little neurosis. And we are then less affected by it when it happens to us. So that was an incredibly long-winded answer. Yes, I think it's crucial. I think it's vital. I don't think we can get there from here unless we really have the practice and the time to do it formally.
So given the time, I think thank you for continuing the exchange and the conversation. I'll ask Dawn to just say a few
Okay.
things.
Just want to take the time to say thank you so much, Jerome. Your passion for healthcare and social services, to take a break, to look into our hearts and into our minds is so evident, and we're very grateful that you've chosen to come on our little request to come and share with us. And thank you everyone else for being here today and hearing what Jerome has to say. Jerome is actually going to be spending a full day with us on a Wednesday, a full day of learning the art of meditation and presence. And so if you're still interested in that, there are a few more spots available. Thank you very much for your time and your patience today. And thank you so much, Jerome.
And there's books out?
Thank you. I also wanted to say that if you're interested in purchasing Jerome's book, it's out just outside the room here at $15. Okay. Thank you.